Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be taking a close look at the salary cap situation for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2024 and also beyond 2024. Try to put together a lot of seasons here just to get an idea of where they stand, how much of their money is effectively spent, and then what's it going to look like when we start extending some of this core that's coming off of rookie deals. So I've got some projections made in this other tab here. We're going to take a look through that. And we want to talk about really how sustainable is the way they're building this team and what might need to change in the future, and just kind of an overall view of how this team will look under the Trevor Lawrence deal. So with that all said, we're going to jump right into this. So what I've got here is a document I've put together. It has information with cap hits, has the average per year value of the contract, so what they're valuing the player at and effectively spending on them. And then it also factors how much money is being pushed down the road. So this is essentially going to show you a number of how much money you're going to spend in the future against the cap that's going to actually end up being money that, was paid for a previous season. So I've got all these numbers here. And then we've got depth charts throughout these years to kind of show you which players are on the roster. And then we've also got, whenever I fill this out over time, the draft selections to keep track of that, grades and all that. But we're not going to worry about that part as much. So what we've got here is 53 players that are rostered on the team right now. You've also got multiple players that are not really projected to make it right now that very much could. I'm sure some of them will. Be hard to imagine guys like Ventrell Miller, Parker Washington not making it on the team, and then you've got some rookies in here. So there's going to be some hard decisions, but effectively what happens is that the top 53 players, especially as far as pay and how much they're earning that way, are going to be the ones that count towards the cap. We've also got dead money here. So this is the amount of money that the Jaguars have effectively basically cost themselves from maybe cutting a player, trading a player. This is money from players that are just no longer on the roster. So you get big hits from guys that you move on from. This is normal, especially when you had a lot of guys you had to change. Talking about Fulvar and Zufadakasi, for example, Rayshawn Jenkins, players like that. Now, looking into the numbers here, where the Jaguars currently stand is having about $28.5 million in cap space available. You'll see some numbers that'll vary a little bit. For example, you'll see something close to maybe $30 million from one of these pages. Now, what some of them don't factor in is that they do not have 53 players counting, they have 51. Because during the offseason, 51 players count against the cap. That helps you basically have a little more room to stay under the limit and to be able to spend, and you fix that by the season. So what we're looking at here in 2024 is a team with $28.5 million effectively available in cap space, and a team that also, on top of that, and this is the important thing to factor in the cap health, has pushed a lot of money down the road. So we see here that total amount for all these players is $125 million. So that's a lot of cap space. We are talking about an amount that is roughly half of what you're allotted for a season. Now, as time goes on, the salary cap will increase. It's just a natural thing that's taking place. The NFL market is growing. Inflation is an issue. All these things are going to push to where the Jaguars will have more money to spend every year. And that's going to help them as well, because that allows them to keep up with the rookies that they end up signing. So looking at some of these big cap hits, because you've got a couple players who really factor into this. One big one is Christian Kirk. He's going to come in around $24 million in 2025 as well, his final year. He also carries void years, so you're going to have to worry about that. Foye Oluokun has some, although this will carry over the course of his current contract. He has no void years on it. They actually end up getting a little bit ahead on Trevor Lawrence's deal, so they were supposed to pay about 11 to 12 million this year, ended up putting it up to about 15 million because they got the room available. That's the way they structured the contract. But in the future, they'll be pushing more money down the road, as we'll see. You've also got guys like Josh Allen, for example, really small first-year cap hit, especially in comparison to what he is supposed to be earning every year. This is basically what ends up being a third of it. So a lot of money pushed down the road. Evan Ingram is another one with some big charges on his void years. You're also looking at the defensive tackles, some of the defensive linemen, Gabriel Davis, Eric Armstead, guys who have small cap hits this year. They end up signing pretty big deals. Then you got a lot of minimal ones here. So these are going to be a lot of like your rookies and maybe those veterans who came in on cheaper deals to fill a need for a while. So that's what you get towards the bottom of this list. Now, I think that's actually 0, so I'll replace that there. But we move on into the future, and you're going to see where there's some questions about how much money has been pushed down the road, how it's kind of staying the same. That's before signing more free agents. That's before extensions. This is kind of where things start to raise concern, especially when you're looking at this APY value. As of now, the Jaguars essentially have spent as much as they were given this year. Because the way you look at this is that you were given $255.4 million to spend in 2024 on your roster. You end up spending what is effectively about $256 million. Now, the cap hits will look different, right? But I'll give you an example of a contract to explain this. Cam Robinson's deal. Now, we're getting to the end of it, but what he signed was essentially about a $54 million deal over the course of 3 seasons, so $18 million a year. His cap hits were around $8 million, $23 million, and $23 million. So even though the first year it was $8 million, the real value in what they're really paying him is $18 million. Because otherwise, if we weren't doing that, the number on Cam Robinson would be larger. But it isn't, because this is the average value. This is what the player is being valued at by the team and what they're being paid at for that season effectively. Because you look at his deal as well, the rest of this money to get up to that $21.9 million is pretty much all bonus money that he's been paid in the past. That's a future cap hit coming to life in 2024. So going to future seasons, we go to 2025. We have 46 players listed on the roster here. As of now, and this is before some key extensions, we're talking about guys like Andre Sisco, we're talking about Tyson Campbell, guys like that. We end up having $25 million effectively that we can spend. This is also not counting in what you're going to want to spend in free agency to fill holes that are inevitably going to come up. As of now, they do have $70 million roughly again that is available in cap space. So that's a good number, right? And this all looks great. But it's not necessarily indicative of how healthy the cap is. You might have a team out there, say like the Washington Commanders, I don't know their specific numbers, they might have roughly that same amount of money available, but they have not put as much into the future. They do not have as many cap hits down the road. This is future money that you're borrowing, essentially. So right now, before spending anything next year, aside from who they already have under contract, the Jaguars are roughly $70 million in the hole. Now, I do want to note, teams usually operate this way. They do not go to the extent that Jacksonville does all the time, but teams will usually have more money pushed into the future than they have available in cap space that year left over. Because you're going to get all these numbers from your rookie deals. Naturally, teams usually have a minimum base salary the first year, and they put the rest in the signing bonus. So you will have numbers such as like Evan Ingram here, although this will all be on void years. You'll have numbers like Christian Kirk's. So that's normal, but it's the extent the Jaguars are going to that is different from most teams. So with about, let's say, 7 players left to bring on the team, you have this much money available. You can spend in that offseason. But you're still going to be over the average per year. And this is where we're going to see it start. Because if you talk about an Andre Sisco and a Tyson Campbell, together those guys are worth probably a little over $30 million. Just those two players alone is going to get you well over this number. You've got other players you got to bring back as well. So it doesn't just end there. So that's going to be the concern for the Jaguars down the road, because that number is going to get larger. That's going to make the cap down the road get bigger. And that's going to make the amount of money you have to work with much less. Go to 2026 now. Now you're down to 31 players rostered on the team. Everyone listed down here is a void cap hit. So you still have money from Brandon Scherf. You're going to have a lot of money over the course of all these years. Evan Ingram is going to go into effect. Christian Kirk's going to go into effect. These players are not on the roster in this scenario right now. You've also got Mitch Morse, Devin Duvernay, and Blake Hance. Minimal amounts, right? But you do not have a ton of players rostered. Now, to give you an idea of where the depth chart sits in all these years, we'll go to 2025 real quick. I'll show you that because I forgot to. You would need to bring back Beathard or get a backup quarterback. You're probably looking at adding a receiver. You're going to need to bring in another tight end. You need a lot of offensive line depth. You're going to need to bring back Cam, or you're going to need to draft a tackle. Figure out something there. You're probably going to want someone other than Cooper Hodges starting. And I hope I'm wrong, right? It'd be great if Hodges works out, and that's going to help us out a lot. But we'll have to see first. And on defense, you got a question opposite of Ronald Darby because, well, you know, Tyson Campbell isn't their contract here. And then you got to wonder if Ronald Darby is still going to be someone you want to start. So you've got different questions. You've got Andre Sisco here as well, guys we mentioned before. But there's a lot of players you got to look at adding. In 2026, where you have roughly 97 million or so that is available in APY. And keep in mind that about half that's going to be gone from what you spend in the year before. You've got a few more players to worry about being off the roster here. So if we go into the depth chart, we're going to have to throw in fifth-year options for guys like Devin Lloyd, Trayvon Walker, who are not on the roster here. You're going to have another cornerback spot open. Now, if Jarion Jones ends up being a legit starter on the outside, that helps you out a lot. That would be really good for this team. But that is a question that has to be answered. You are on the offensive line, also going to have a mass exodus at the center position. You're going to need to bring back Evan Ingram or draft a tight end. Christian Kirk is not going to be here. And Trevor Lawrence will be here, so I will add him back on here. That's the situation you're looking at. You've got a lot of money that you're going to have to spend to fill these holes, right? And as you go on, the important thing and what's going to be stressed very hard in this is that the team has to start supplementing what it's doing better with draft capital. They're going to have to use that better. They have to prove that the way they're doing things is getting future starters, because there's massive questions about that right now. I feel more confident in this draft class than I did with 2023's, but there's still questions about the development of players and when they start. So that is going to be something that they're going to have to prove very clearly. And we could go as far as 2027 here, but as you'll see, not a lot of players rostered, a lot of positions to fill because you got 12 guys here. But point is, with 2027, the amount of void hit you're going to have. So the numbers here, you end up having, I think it's roughly 31 million, a little bit over that in cap hit that you're paying for players who are not on the roster. And I believe you might have even more in just future void cap hits down the road. You also see how big these numbers get for Trevor Lawrence and Josh Allen. And this is just a few guys on the roster at that point, right? You're going to have a lot more that are going to add on to those numbers. But that's a lot of money still pushed down the road. Now, I want to take a look at some projections. And I just put this together. It's not going to be perfect numbers, right? I cannot perfectly predict, of course, what players are going to earn on their second deals. But I took a guess at where players might land and generally try to decide with the team moving on from older players, guys that didn't make a ton of sense to keep, guys they could probably replace, and then that the younger players ended up playing well and earning second contracts. And the point of this is to effectively show you that the Jaguars are probably at some point going to either have some tough decisions to make with who's going to stay on the roster, or they're going to have to keep pushing money down the road. And they're going to get to the point in a few years where that credit card is going to be close to maxed out. So we'll take a look at that. So we're starting in 2024, and we've got basically the same numbers that the team currently has. Going to 2025, here's where you get some of the extensions. So you got to bring back guys like Tyson Campbell, Andre Sisco. I brought back Cam Robinson in this scenario. You know, maybe they draft a tackle, that would be better. We're generally bringing back guys that they might see as the core of this team. We also threw in CJ Beathard, and we threw in cap hits for all of their earlier draft picks in this next class, the ones that could get onto the roster, because you see we get to the limit of 53 players. So numbers for these guys. For Tyson Campbell, and we'll see where this ends up, right? We do not know 100% for sure. I think that he's probably going to earn just below that upper echelon of top cornerbacks. Right now, the top of the market is around 20 to 21 million a year. I have him at 16.5 million. I have Andre Sisco a little bit behind at about 15 million. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think the only question with him is really injuries at this point. And so maybe he signs for a little bit cheaper. I could see something maybe 13, 14. That could be in the realm of possibility. But I think if they extend him down the road, which is probably what will happen with Sisco specifically, that number will probably go up, because I think he's going to be in for a really good year. And then Cam Robinson, I took it down a little bit. He's getting a bit older, not too old to play, right? But you've had injury questions. There's been problems there. I still think he's a good player, but I'm probably putting it around 15 million in the future. And with all these deals, I'm generally trying to push money down the road like the Jaguars do. Now, they do a better job of it than me, but you can generally see that your early cap hits are going to be a lot smaller. I will also try to share these documents with you guys so you can take a look for yourself. Now, Andre Sisco, kind of same thing here, although I need to update that there. You end up having, 3 years, 45 million is what I meant to do. So you end up having these cap hits, right? Not a bad cap hit to start. You're still keeping the numbers down. It's generally what you're going to see. 2 void years is what I did on all these players. And then Cam Robinson, kind of the same thing here. Big signing bonus. End up pushing cap hits down the road, having some void years. They can restructure some of this money. And then Beathard, I went with about 2 million a year. Now, just with these moves, and then bringing in your draft picks, you are now, based off of what is probably a conservative estimate for the salary cap in the future, 32 million over what you should be spending a year. And that is just to bring back your guys. And you don't bring them all back here. We are counting guys like Brandon Scherf, Mac Jones, Tyler Shatley, Walker Little, Luke Farrell, and Gregory Jr. as walking for this team. Now, not all those guys are big-time names. It's Brandon Scherf is pretty clearly out there. But that's a big player to move on from. So you're going to need your draft resources to go into that. So that's going to be where the picks probably go. And as we know, the Jaguars usually get maybe 2 starters out of a draft class. So you're replacing probably 1 or 2 guys in this scenario. Now, you can see as well here, money that you can restructure down the road. You can still see there's a decent amount that the Jaguars could push into the future if they needed to. So this is going to allow them to stick with the cap, not go too far over. The amount of money pushed down the road gets significantly higher, though. So you get up to about 165 million. This year, you're looking at 125. So now your cap space is becoming a bit of an issue. Now, like I said before, in the air scenario, you still got a lot available in 2025 if you want to spend. But that money is going to be taken very soon. So going forward into a future year, going into 2026, this is where you see Lawrence's cap hits start to rise. You get up to 24 million. Trayvon Walker, Devin Lloyd, fifth-year options might be higher than this as well. This is just what it was for this year, so we'll see how that changes. Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk have to be extended. You're probably going to pay each of them a little more unless they take deals with the team. I can't really project that. So you're looking at big deals for both of them, probably 3 years, 2 void years on top of that. Travis Etienne, I think he'll be a player they bring back. And I think you're sitting somewhere around maybe 12 to 13 million for him unless he has an incredible season, which I'm not sure he will because, and technically this is 2 years that'll go by. There's questions about the run blocking, right, and how good that is. And I think that severely limits the ceiling for Travis Etienne. So I think this is probably about where he falls. Then you got some smaller names like Logan Cook, Andrew Wingard, important players, right? But not guys who are going to take massive cap hits. And then you've got your other draft picks. So we're going off the same picks as before. So right now the Jaguars are projected at 16th. I know fans will think it'll be a lot later. Generally not going to make a huge difference here. But you've got 52 players under contract. You could throw in 2 more to get up to 54. Or actually, we need to get up to 53. But you end up seeing that the cap space, and this is keeping in mind, we are not signing any external free agents. You are now down to 11 million, keeping all these players, pushing money down the road still. You now have over 200 million pushed into the future that has been effectively already paid out and taken for players for their work in 2026 or beforehand. So this is not a good cap situation in just a few years. So you've got some major questions there. And you look at the depth chart throughout all these seasons, you're going to have some needs, right? 2025, the year before what we were looking at, center. Maybe Mitch Morse doesn't work out the way you want him to. Devon Hamilton could have those injury issues really derail his career. Ronald Darby, I think, will be fine, but he's getting older. And I think Cooper Hodges is a very likely player that you move on from as far as a starter. I think he stays on the team, of course, but I'm not sure that he ends up actually getting to start. So you've already got 4 needs there, right? You move into the next season, and you've got some very clear question marks at these positions, because now if you didn't address them before, they are problems. So you're at least looking at 2 offensive linemen, and you're looking at cornerback. So you've got some issues here, right? A lot of money pushed down the road, a lot of cap charges. You've already done really a lot of what you can restructuring, and you don't have that much cap space available. And this number would be smaller if they're spending on anything else. You've also got some players leaving in 2026 that you got to replace. You've got both your centers. You got some offensive line depth in Blake Hance. You've got your kick returner in Devin Duvernay. You've got 2 cornerbacks. You've got Chad Muma. And you've got special teamer Daniel Thomas. You do have money that you can restructure. And if you split that restructuring and that signing bonus over 3 years, it's about $60 million that you could free up. Go to 2027. It's our final year that we'll do here. You end up seeing, and we move on from some big-time players here. Eric Armstead. It's going to be 34 that year. Roy Robertson Harris. I think he'll probably be someone they cut before, who knows though, way out in the future. Ezra Cleveland. You've got this whole draft class practically that we don't know about right now. If you're keeping him, what we know right now is probably not big cap hits, right? You've got players that you've got to extend. Anton Harrison, 5th-year option. Gabriel Davis, if you want to keep him around. $16 million a year might be the number if he plays better. You're looking at guys like Trayvon, Devin Lloyd, who are going to be going into that second contract then. Just guessing on numbers, right? This is going to be very hard to predict where it is, but say these guys earn those second contracts, play really well. Could be something around here. Could be even more for Trayvon Walker, to be fair. And then Antonio Johnson. You're either going to have to replace him or you're going to have to pay him. And if he plays well, if he plays like he did that first year and improves upon that, he could end up earning a lot as a safety. And considering this is down the road, that market is probably going to have a much higher number at the top than what it does right now. So you're looking at things like that. You got another draft class coming in, and that's really where you're going to help this situation out, right? You got to get rookies. You got to build young. But you're looking at now $235 million down the road. This is even restructuring Christian Kirk's contract. So you're pushing some money down the road from that. You end up having $860,000 left. That is not spending money on any external free agents all the way through the next 3 off seasons. That is bringing back most of your guys, not all of them, most of them. And this is your depth chart going into this. You now have a need at left guard, and you might want to bring in some pass rush help. So that's kind of what we're looking at long term, right? And once again, not perfect numbers. There's going to be some problems with these down the road. And what will probably naturally happen is there are often going to be players that get paid who do not end up panning out, and they end up getting moved on from earlier. That frees up cap space, but also has you either sign a free agent to replace them or draft for the position. So the point is, the direction that this team is heading right now is that they have to learn how to draft better. And maybe they did that this year. Verdict is very much out there. We haven't even played a snap from this 2024 class. But they have to prove they can draft better. They have to prove they can get starters deep into the class. They're going to do that consistently. They're not going to throw picks away. And if they can do that, that's going to help them avoid this scenario. But the way they've built this team is either a short-term solution for what you're going to see, or it's going to be a team where you're going to have some Saints-like numbers down the road with your cap space. So we'll see what happens, right? But this is kind of where you could go. And are they going to keep all these players? Very unlikely, right? Like, I think that next offseason, they might have to move on from one of these guys already, unfortunately. They're going to have to rely as well on some players saying that they don't want to earn the maximum amount. Maybe they want security. You get a Foye Sadaluakon kind of deal next offseason that can help you out a little bit. Maybe Trevor Lawrence takes some pay cuts throughout the deal to help keep some of his players here. But the point is that the amount of money that's being spent right now, especially before you have a really good draft class coming up for second contracts, they are very quickly going to be spending more than what they're getting allotted. And just to show those numbers again, because I don't think I mentioned them specifically, $55 million over is what you'd expect in 2026, moving on from players as well. In 2027, $64 million over. So there's going to have to be a change in how this team is built down the road. This is going to have to become a team that is focused around the draft, that is finding a lot of their starters through that, that's not going towards veteran solutions all the time. Because if they keep going down this road, if it works, well, you got a limited timetable. And if it doesn't, you have a long period of time where you're going to be getting rid of these cap charges that are going to be hitting you in the future. So there's a little bit of a look for you guys. Like I said, I'll share these documents so you guys can check them out. Don't take everything as gospel, right? Like I said, players will probably end up being moved on from. I do not see a scenario where they keep everyone here. That they're going to be forced at some point to have to make some moves, unfortunately. And it might result in players we really like not being on this team. But the crux of this is that the draft is going to become very important for Jacksonville's long-term success. Because if they can't find success at the draft, they're going to start running out of money to find it in other ways. So thank you all for watching. Give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think about the team's salary cap situation. I think it's good for a couple years, but we're going to start seeing some questions down the road. So appreciate y'all watching, though. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Check out the content we'll have later this week. We'll talk a little bit about the tight end class on Sunday for this next year, a little bit of summer scouting. And I plan to do a recording on the mock rebuild that I've been doing on Twitter, and you guys can check that out if you want. So that'll all be available. But thanks. Have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.